Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today we're going to be going through the new DNC rule change that forces superdelegates to not vote on the first ballot unless the candidate does reach over 50%, and pretty much what it means for the Democratic Party's future and the 2020 presidential election. Right now, if we look at where the Democrats stood back in 2016, they had superdelegates that were able to vote on the first ballot. Although Hillary Clinton did win the majority of pledged delegates, they were able to vote as superdelegates, which pushed her even more over the top. Pretty much, after Hillary Clinton won California, New Jersey, and a number of other primaries, she secured the majority of pledged delegates, making her the official Democratic nominee. Many people did feel cheated by the superdelegate process, but no matter any way you spin it, Hillary Clinton was able to win the nomination, and whether it was fair and square is a whole nother discussion. But for right now, based off the pledged delegate numbers, Hillary Clinton won the Democratic nomination. Although superdelegates did back her, they did not make an implication on who would have been the nominee. If all superdelegates had backed Bernie Sanders, Clinton would have still won the nomination. So when we look at what this new rule change does, essentially if you're not familiar with it, on the first ballot, unless a candidate reaches over 50% or the majority of pledged delegates, superdelegates cannot vote on the first ballot. It will go to the first ballot and they will vote, and if it's a 45-43 tie, then they will move over to the superdelegates, where the superdelegates can actually make an impact on who becomes the nominee. For example, let's say Bernie Sanders got 46% of the vote, Hillary Clinton got 48%. First ballot stands as it is, 48% for Hillary, and pledged delegates 46 for Bernie Sanders. Then the first ballot is done. They move over into a second ballot where superdelegates can now push their agenda and vote in this essentially just vote the same way they would have before in a second ballot, and many of them, of course, did back Hillary Clinton, so she probably would have became the nominee even if these rules had stood back then. I mean, she would have won the nomination, to be completely honest with you, but that was just in the scenario where she got 48 and he got 46. So essentially, after the whole Clinton Sanders campaigns, many people were angry at the superdelegate process, considering many of them, hundreds of them actually, endorsed Clinton before Bernie Sanders announced running and before the primaries even began. So when it came down to it, a lot of them felt like, oh, they were already backing a certain candidate, they want someone to win, we cannot win this election because of that, and things like that definitely did disenfranchise Sanders voters, and many of them were not too excited about voting in 2016. But now that this new rule is in, even though it may seem like a momentous, huge move and a reformation type move from the DNC, honestly, it isn't. When we look at what happened in 2016, in 2008, 2004, 2000, the same thing would happen here, just it would go to a second ballot. These superdelegates' opinions are not changing. They're not being suppressed. They're not being barred from voting until the second, unless it's the first ballot. They would have their say in the second ballot, which means that they have a huge shot at impacting the 2020 presidential election race the same way they did in 2016. Pretty much is just saying on the first ballot, we're just doing exactly what we saw with pledged delegates, the exact same. We're just prolonging the process a little bit and moving over into superdelegates, which can vote the exact same way they did in 2016, just with different candidates. So again, another 2020 example where it actually makes sense. Let's say Joe Biden decides to run and Bernie Sanders decides to run. Biden gets 49%, Sanders gets 49%. On the first ballot, both of them will show up with 49%. The only thing different is it moves over into a second ballot where superdelegates can now, vote. And then let's say Sanders gets 49% again, but Biden gets 51% because of superdelegates. That's exactly how it would go. The superdelegates have an opportunity to vote. Yes, they are disenfranchised on the first ballot only, but the only thing that does is prolong the process a little bit. Nothing changes in the first ballot compared to what we see in the results. So again, this isn't some huge change as it may seem. It's just a slight change, but a lot of Democrats are turning it out into being something huge. The only way superdelegates can vote on the first ballot is if a candidate wins the majority of pledged delegates, which means over 50%, and then the superdelegates can vote. So let's take 2016, for example. If these rules were implemented, Hillary Clinton would have the superdelegates vote on the first ballot because she won the majority of pledged delegates. She got a total of 2,842 delegates. Bernie Sanders got 1,865. Those would be exact same numbers if these rules were implemented in 2016. So again, this would only change the outcome of a race if a candidate was behind, and let's say Sanders gets 45%, Biden gets 43%, and then Biden becomes the nominee 51-49 because of superdelegates. That's the only way that someone who won the plurality of voters would be disenfranchised in terms of these rules. But pretty much we're not going to see anything drastically change from what we saw in 2016, 2008, and previous elections dating all the way back to 1984, the first time superdelegates were implemented in the DNC for the Democratic nomination process. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.